In the entire history of the Catholic Church, few minds have ever shone as brightly as that of Saint Thomas Aquinas. Known as the Angelic Doctor, he was a quiet, towering intellectual giant whose works of philosophy and theology shaped the course of Western thought for centuries. He lived in the 13th century, a time of profound conflict and encounter between the great civilizations of Christendom and the Islamic world. While the fires of the Crusades raged in the Holy Land, Aquinas, a humble Dominican friar, chose to wield a different kind of weapon, the power of the human intellect, guided by faith. His approach to the claims of Islam was not one of angry polemics or simplistic denunciations. Instead, he began with a far more fundamental question, one that speaks with startling relevance to our own modern skeptical age. Faced with multiple, competing claims of divine revelation, how can any rational person determine which one, if any, is actually true? Aquinas argued that a genuine revelation from God must be accompanied by certain marks of credibility, external signs that appeal to our reason and confirm the truth of the message. This is the story of his powerful analysis, a journey that begins not with an attack, but with a foundational argument comparing the very methods by which Christianity and Islam were established, and what those methods reveal about their ultimate claims to truth. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Belief, Reason and Revelation. The primary work where Aquinas addresses this challenge is his masterpiece, the Summa contra Gentiles, or Summary Against the Gentiles. It was a work of profound missionary zeal, likely written to equip Christian missionaries in Spain and North Africa who were in direct dialogue with Muslims and Jews. Aquinas knew that he could not begin by quoting the New Testament, because Muslims do not accept its authority. He had to start from a place of common ground, natural reason. In the 6th chapter of the first book, Aquinas lays out his core question: how do we establish the credibility of a faith? He explains that some truths, like the existence of God, can be arrived at through reason alone. But other truths, the central mysteries of the Christian faith, like the Trinity and the Incarnation, are far above the capacity of human reason to discover. These truths can only be known if God chooses to reveal them. Therefore, Aquinas argues, when God reveals such mysteries, he provides accompanying external signs or works that are visible to all, which serve as a rational confirmation that the message is indeed from him. These are the marks of credibility. Chapter 2. The Christian Marks of Credibility. Aquinas first applies this test to the Christian faith, laying out the rational evidence for its credibility. He argues that Christianity's truth is confirmed by a series of powerful signs that defy any purely human explanation. First, he points to the humble origins and rapid growth of the Church. The faith was spread not by the wise, the rich, or the powerful, but by a small group of poor, uneducated Galilean fishermen. These simple men preached a message of humility and sacrifice that was deeply unappealing to the pagan world. Yet, in the face of brutal, empire-wide persecution, this message triumphed. For Aquinas, the conversion of the Roman world, not by the sword, but by the power of preaching and martyrdom, was itself a miracle. Second, he points to the visible miracles that confirmed the apostles' preaching. He argues that for their incredible message to be believed, God equipped the apostles with the power to perform supernatural works. The sick are healed, the lame walk, and the dead are raised. These public demonstrations of divine power served as an external, verifiable seal of approval on the truth of their words. Finally, Aquinas points to the fulfillment of prophecy, arguing that the Old Testament contained hundreds of specific prophecies regarding the Messiah, which were perfectly fulfilled in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. Chapter 3. The Contrast. Aquinas' analysis of Islam's origins. Having established the Christian marks of credibility, Aquinas then, in the same chapter, applies the very same test to the claims of Muhammad and the origins of Islam, based on the historical sources available to him in the 13th century. His argument is a rational analysis of the historical claims. First, he contrasts the Christian mysteries with the nature of Islamic doctrine. He argues that the core tenets of Islam do not contain truths that are above human reason. He also argues that Muhammad seduced peoples by promises of carnal pleasure, contrasting the Quran's descriptions of paradise with the purely spiritual reward promised by Christ. Second, he contrasts the methods of dissemination. While Christianity spread in the face of persecution, Aquinas argues that Muhammad was a man of arms, and that his teachings were spread primarily by the force of the sword. He notes that multitudes were compelled to join his faith through violence. Third, and for Aquinas, most importantly, he addresses the question of miracles. He states that Muhammad is not reported to have performed any public, supernatural signs that would have provided external confirmation of his claims. The only miracle offered, Aquinas notes, is the Quran itself, but this, he argues, is a circular proof, as the book's truth is attested to only by the claims of the one who produced it. He concludes that the signs accompanying the rise of Islam were not the divine signs of supernatural works and humble persuasion, but the human signs of worldly success and military conquest. This powerful and incisive argument from St. Thomas Aquinas is not a condemnation of a people, but a cold, logical analysis of historical claims and the evidence presented to support them. Having laid this epistemological foundation, this test of credibility for any revealed religion, Aquinas then moves to the very heart of the matter, the doctrines themselves. He proceeds to build a rational case for the most profound mysteries of the Christian faith, the very teachings that Islam most forcefully rejects, the Holy Trinity and the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And it is in his defense of these core truths that we see the angelic doctor at the height of his intellectual power. Chapter 4. The Mystery of the Triune God. For Islam, the absolute core doctrine is Tawhid, the absolute oneness and indivisibility of God. From this perspective, the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, one God in three divine persons, is seen as a departure from pure monotheism, a form of polytheism or tritheism. Aquinas understood this objection completely. He affirmed, with Muslim and Jewish philosophers, that there is only one God, and that this God is simple, perfect, and unchanging. But Aquinas did not believe the Trinity was a contradiction of this truth. Instead, he argued that once it is revealed, the Trinity is shown to be a more perfect and philosophically coherent vision of a perfect being. Starting from the common ground that God is perfect, Aquinas argues that God must therefore have a perfect intellect and a perfect will. Since God is perfect intellect, his understanding of himself must also be perfect. This perfect idea, or word, that God the Father thinks of himself is so complete and so perfect that it is not a mere thought, but is another person, identical in nature to the Father. This is the eternal Son, the Logos, the Word of God, who St. John tells us was with God and the Word was God. Furthermore, God's perfect will must perfectly love his own infinite goodness. The object of his love is his own nature, which is perfectly expressed in the Son. This eternal, perfect bond of love between the Father who loves and the Son who is loved is itself so real, so perfect, and so substantial that it is also a distinct person, the Holy Spirit. Therefore, for Aquinas, the Trinity does not divide God into three parts. It reveals that the inner life of the one God is a dynamic and eternal community of self-knowing and self-giving love. He argued that this vision of God is far more perfect than that of a solitary, monadic being who is eternally alone. A God who is love in his very nature is a more perfect and complete being. Chapter 5. The Logic of the Incarnation. The second great stumbling block is the Incarnation. For Islam, God is utterly transcendent, and the idea that he would become a man, a created being, is seen as a debasement of his divine nature, an unthinkable mixing of the creator with the created. Aquinas, once again, does not try to prove the Incarnation by reason alone, which he held to be a mystery of faith. Instead, he argues for its profound fittingness, showing how it is the most logical and beautiful solution to the problem of human sin and the most perfect expression of God's love. He argues that the Incarnation reveals God's infinite goodness and love in the most profound way possible, by sharing in our own human nature. A distant God who issues commands from on high is one thing. A God who humbles himself to share in our own human nature, to walk among us, to experience our joys and sorrows, and ultimately to die for us, is a love that is almost beyond comprehension. It also provides humanity with the perfect, living model of holiness. Instead of just a set of rules, in Jesus Christ, we have a perfect man to imitate. Most critically, the Incarnation provides the only possible means for a perfect atonement for sin. Aquinas argues that since sin is an offense against the infinite majesty of God, it required an infinite satisfaction. A mere human being could never offer such an infinite act. But only a human being could act on behalf of the human race. The only possible solution was a person who was both fully human to represent us and fully divine to offer an act of infinite value. This person is Jesus Christ, the God-man. His sacrifice on the cross was the one and only act that could perfectly bridge the infinite gap between God and man created by sin. Aquinas argues that the Incarnation does not diminish God. It displays his supreme power and humility, a divine condescension born not of weakness, but of a love that knows no bounds. Chapter 6. A Final Reflection, Faith and Reason. We have now explored the core of St. Thomas Aquinas' great intellectual project in the Summa Contra Gentiles. We began with his analysis of the external marks of credibility for any divine revelation, where he contrasted the verifiable public miracles and humble origins of Christianity with the account of Islam's origins. We then moved to his internal, philosophical defense of the core Christian mysteries, the Trinity and the Incarnation, showing them to be not contrary to reason, but the fulfillment of it, revealing a more perfect and loving vision of God and his plan for humanity. What makes Aquinas' approach so enduring is that his refutation was not based on mockery or polemics. It was a profound and respectful invitation to a rational dialogue, starting from the common ground of the human intellect's search for truth. For St. Thomas Aquinas, faith and reason are the two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. He believed that since God is the author of both the natural world and of divine revelation, the truths of reason and the truths of faith can never truly be in contradiction. His work stands as a timeless testament to the Catholic conviction that our faith is not a blind leap in the dark, but a reasonable trust in a God who reveals himself through both mighty works in history and profound mysteries that, while transcending our reason, ultimately satisfy the deepest longings of the human heart.